There's a particular kind of silence that follows a cruelty so casual the person who delivered it has already forgotten it happened. My son Marcus had already walked back through the sliding glass doors of the terminal before the words had fully settled into my body. "Figured out, Mom. You're a grown woman." He said it the way he might say it to a valet who had brought the wrong car. Mildly, without turning around, his hand already raised in something that was not quite a wave, more the dismissal of someone who has already moved on to the next thing in their mind. I stood at the departures drop-off at Denver International Airport on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, which I will tell you about in a moment, with one carry-on suitcase, my purse, and a phone notification informing me that my flight had been canceled. Not by the airline, by Marcus. He had booked it. He had unbooked it. And now he was gone. The temperature was 11 degrees. The wind off the mountains made it feel closer to zero. I was wearing the coat I had packed for a 5-day visit to my son's home in the foothills of Denver, not for standing at curbside while February did what February does in Colorado. I am Eleanor Voss. I am 68 years old. I am a retired woman who spent 31 years building something my children know almost nothing about. And on the 14th of February, when my son Marcus told me to figure it out, I smiled the way I have learned to smile in the last few years, a small, contained expression that does not reach my eyes, and I watched him disappear through those doors. Then I reached into my purse. I found a contact I was looking for. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Voss." "Diana," I said. "I need a ticket home to Charleston tonight. First class, if they have it." "Of course," she said, already typing. One moment. The wind moved through my hair. Somewhere behind me, a family with matching luggage was laughing about something their youngest had said. Normal life, continuing at its normal pace, indifferent to the particular quality of my afternoon. "Mrs. Voss," Diana said, "I have you on the 7:15 to Charlotte, connecting to Charleston, first class. There's a Centurion lounge in the main terminal. Shall I send your credentials to your phone?" "Please," I said. "Done. Is there anything else?" I looked at the doors through which my son had vanished. "Not tonight," I said. "Thank you, Diana." I ended the call. I picked up my suitcase. I walked toward the terminal doors, and I did not look back. What Marcus did not know, what he has never known, and what I had spent years deciding he was not ready to know, was that Diana was the head of asset management for a private wealth firm. She managed, among other things, the trust my late husband Richard had established 22 years ago. The trust one had spent 2 decades growing quietly, carefully, the way you tend something that matters precisely because no one else is watching. My son canceled a $240 economy ticket. Diana booked me a first-class seat on a 7:15 flight and charged it to one of 4 accounts she manages on my behalf. Marcus thinks I am a retired schoolteacher living on a pension. He is not entirely wrong. I was a schoolteacher for 23 years. I do receive a pension. What he has never bothered to ask about, what none of my children have ever thought to investigate, is what their father built, what I inherited when Richard died, what I did with it for the 20 years since, and whose name is on the paperwork for essentially everything Marcus believes belongs to him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If this story is already finding its way under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe to Margaret Reed, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She always said the ones who stay quiet longest know the most. Let's see if that's true. You cannot understand what happened at Denver International on February 14th without understanding who I was before Marcus decided what kind of woman I was. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, in a house with 3 sisters and a father who worked the docks and a mother who cleaned other people's rooms at a hotel downtown. They were not poor in the way that defeats a person. They were careful. My mother tracked every dollar with a small green notebook she kept in her apron pocket, and when the money was short, which it often was, she was the last one to notice it in her face. She smiled exactly the same whether we had roast chicken or beans and cornbread for dinner, and she said grace with the same gratitude either way. I learned more from that woman than from any teacher I ever had. I went to school on a scholarship. I studied education. I met Richard Voss in my second year of graduate school. He was getting his MBA. He was from Charleston. He had the particular quiet confidence of a man who knows what he wants without needing to announce it. We were married in 1981 in my mother's backyard with 40 people and a borrowed tablecloth. Richard went into commercial real estate. I taught school. We had Marcus in 1982 and Claire in 1985. We live in a house in Charleston that was not large and not small, and we were comfortable in a way that requires constant, invisible work that children never see. Richard was brilliant at his work. I say this not out of loyalty to his memory, but because it is simply true. He had a particular gift for seeing the value in things other people had overlooked, properties that sat quietly in transitional neighborhoods, land that appeared useless until you understood what the city was planning to put beside it. He was patient in a way that commercial real estate rewards. He would hold something for 6 years while the world caught up to what he already understood about it. By the time Marcus was finishing high school, Richard had built something substantial. Not a fortune in the tabloid sense, not a yacht and a compound and a profile in a magazine. A quiet, carefully constructed portfolio of commercial properties and residential developments, and a few investments that had performed in ways that surprised even him. We did not discuss this with the children. Richard believed, and I came to share this belief, that inherited wealth without earned character is a gift that destroys more than it gives. We lived modestly. We drove reasonable cars. The children had everything they needed and were given the opportunity to work for what they wanted. When Richard died in 2002, a heart attack, sudden, a Tuesday in April, the kind of ordinary Tuesday that precedes an extraordinary loss. I was 53 years old, and I was alone with a trust document I had not fully read, a family of properties I had observed but never managed, and 2 grown children who were, in their different ways, already moving away from the life we had built. The trust was Richard's final act of love for me and his final act of wisdom about our children. He had placed everything under my management, not split between me and the children, not held in reserve for them. Mine to manage, to grow, to distribute as I saw fit. He had left them each a sum when he died, $100,000 each, enough to start a life, not enough to destroy one. The rest, the properties and the investments and the accounts, remained in my care. You'll know what to do with it, he told me once, years before he died, when we were talking in the way that older married people sometimes talk, sideways, without urgency, about the future they both know is coming. I've always trusted your judgment more than my own. I just had the nerve to act on it. I cried for 8 months after Richard died. I cried the way you cry when someone has been the architecture of your daily life for 21 years and then is simply not there. I cried, and I kept teaching, and I paid the bills, and I attended church, and I called my sisters on Sundays. And then, in the fall of 2003, I called Diana Marsh, who Richard had worked with for years, and I said, "Tell me everything." Diana told me everything. Over the following 6 months, I learned what I owned. I learned what it was worth. I learned what it cost to maintain. I learned what it could become if managed with patience and intelligence, which I had both of, having spent my entire adult life in the presence of a man who modeled both. I will not give you exact numbers because they're not the point. The point is that what Richard had built, and what I have continued to build in the 22 years since his death, is significantly more than my children believe exists. Marcus believes I live on my teacher's pension and the modest inheritance Richard left the family openly. He believes the properties his father once owned were sold off after Richard died. He believes this because I did not correct him. I did not lie to him. I simply did not offer information he never thought to ask for. And I did not offer it because over the years, beginning, if I am honest, before Richard died and accelerating sharply after, I began to see something in my son that made me careful. Marcus was not cruel when he was young. He was not unkind. He was simply the kind of child who, having received something, forgets immediately what it cost. He was bright in school, charming in company, capable of real warmth when he was in the mood for it. He married Serena Colt 11 years ago, and Serena was everything Marcus admired: beautiful, confident, socially fluent, and entirely, efficiently oriented toward what things were worth. I do not despise Serena. I want to say that clearly. I have known people who became what Serena has become because the world required it of them. and I have learned not to mistake the armor for the person wearing it. But Serena has not made that distinction easy. Within the first year of their marriage, I noticed the way the conversation shifted when I was present, the slight lowering of the volume, the particular tone Serena used for me that she did not use for her own mother, the way she managed me the way you manage a piece of furniture that is too large for the room, but belongs to someone important. She was not rude. I want to be precise about this because it matters. Rudeness would have been easier to address. Serena was something more sophisticated than rude. She was the kind of woman who made you feel, at the end of every interaction, that you had somehow arrived in the wrong place, and that everyone else was too polite to say so. It is a particular gift, that particular form of condescension. I recognized it immediately because I had taught school for 23 years, and I had watched children who had learned it from their parents deploy it on classmates who didn't belong to the right social category. The first time Serena used it on me, I was visiting their home in Denver. They had moved from Charleston in 2016 when Marcus's architectural firm expanded westward, and I was standing in her kitchen trying to find a coffee cup. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, and her voice carried that particular blend of warmth and weariness that communicates how have we ended up here again. "The mugs are in the cabinet above the microwave. The ones on the left are for guests. The ones on the right are ours." There was a pause while she adjusted a bouquet on the island. "We find it easier that way," she added. She smiled at me. I smiled back. I thought about the 11,000 square foot commercial property on King Street in Charleston that was generating monthly income she had no idea existed. I poured my coffee from the guest mugs on the left and went to sit in the living room. Marcus and Serena live in a house in the foothills west of Denver that is beautiful and cold in the way that houses are when they have been decorated to impress rather than to inhabit. Everything is the right shade of gray. Everything is the right kind of clean. There are books on the shelves that have never been opened. Their daughter Lily is 10 years old and is the warmest person in that house by a margin so significant it is almost funny. I love Lily the way I loved Marcus when he was 10, which is to say entirely and without condition. Lily has Richard's eyes and his particular quality of stillness. She sits beside you and actually listens, which is a quality that becomes rarer and more precious the longer you live. She draws horses. She is learning to bake sourdough bread. She asks questions that adults do not expect from children and then listens to the full answer without looking at a phone. I had visited Denver in the second week of February for Lily's 10th birthday. This had been arranged in October. I had called Marcus, who had been pleasant enough on the phone, who had said, "Yes, of course, come stay with us for a few days," who had not said, "And I will buy your ticket this time," but whom I had assumed, based on our history, meant something like that. I bought my own ticket. I always buy my own ticket. I fly economy because I see no particular reason to spend money on a wider seat when I am perfectly capable of sitting in a regular one. I have never told Marcus or Serena or anyone else what I could afford to spend on a plane ticket, and I have no interest in doing so. I arrived on February 9th. I was staying through the 14th. The first day was fine. Lily ran down the stairs when I arrived, her socks sliding on the hardwood, her arms already reaching, and buried her face in my shoulder the way she has since she was old enough to hug. "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma," like a small song. Serena appeared behind her. She was dressed in the way she is always dressed when I arrive, perfect and prepared, which communicates that she has made an effort, and also that the effort cost her something she would like me to notice. "Eleanor," she said, "you made it. Not how lovely to see you. Not we're so glad you're here. You made it." As if my arrival were an achievement of navigation rather than a visit. Marcus appeared from his study. He hugged me, briefly, the way men hug their mothers when they have become too busy for the length of hug the situation deserves, and said he had a call in 10 minutes, but would join us for dinner. I know what to do in a house where I am not quite welcome and not quite unwelcome. I have been doing it for 9 years. I put my suitcase in the guest room, which is pleasant enough, a queen bed, a window overlooking the garden, a bathroom down the hall that I share with no one because the house has 4 bathrooms and only 3 regular occupants. I unpacked my things. I took out the birthday present I had brought for Lily, which I had wrapped myself with the paper she likes, the kind with small gold stars. I went back downstairs. Lily was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs with a drawing she had done of the two of us standing in my garden in Charleston. She had drawn my hair correctly, shorter than it used to be, white now, and she had given herself a smile so large it took up most of her face. "That's us," she said, pointing. "It is exactly us," I agreed. Serena was in the kitchen with her back to us, doing something on her phone. She did not turn around. The days of that visit followed the pattern I had learned to expect. Mornings, I made my own coffee from the guest mugs on the left and read or walked in the neighborhood, which is beautiful in February in the cold mountain air, the Rockies visible from the end of every block like a promise. Afternoons I spent with Lily, who was on school break. We baked, we drew, we watched the documentary series about horses she had been saving for my visit. We talked about everything. Her friends, what she wanted to be when she grew up, whether horses could understand music, what I remembered about being 10. I barely saw Marcus. He worked in his study until 7 most evenings. When he emerged, he was tired in the way that busy men are tired. Not empty, just elsewhere. He sat at dinner and participated in the conversation the way you participate in a meeting you know you should be attending. Serena ran the household with the brisk efficiency of someone who has decided that running a household is her particular form of achievement, and I do not criticize this. She is a good mother to Lily in the practical sense. She is present. She organizes. She shows up. What she does not do, at least not when I am there, is make me feel that I belong. The birthday dinner was February 11th. Lily had wanted enchiladas, which she had decided was her favorite food approximately 6 months earlier. Serena had hired a private chef to prepare them, which was both unnecessary and fine. There was a cake. There were candles. Lily made a wish and looked at me when she blew them out, which made my heart do something complicated. After dinner, I helped Lily open her gifts. From Marcus and Serena, a new iPad and an art set that cost more than my first car. From me, the birthday present I had brought, which was a sketchbook I had been filling for 3 months before the visit. Every page a drawing I had done in colored pencil of the things I know Lily loves. Horses, the garden in Charleston, the particular quality of light over the harbor in the early morning. Us, standing in various places, small gold stars scattered on the pages between the drawings. I cannot draw as well as Lily can. I want to be honest about this. But I spent 3 months on that sketchbook, a page a week, and every page had something in it that was specifically hers. Lily looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at me. "Grandma," she said, "you drew me every week." "I did," I said. She held it against her chest. Serena was looking at her phone. Marcus was refilling his wine. That night, after Lily was in bed and I was reading in the guest room, I heard Serena and Marcus talking in the kitchen below me. The house has high ceilings and sound carries, which I do not think they fully appreciate. Already talking about coming back in the summer, Serena was saying. She mentioned it to Lilia. "Marcus, I love your mother, but 5 days is a pause." The sound of a cabinet opening. It's a lot, especially when she just another pause. She doesn't really do anything. She sits with Lily, and that's lovely, but then I have to think about meals and she doesn't expect you to. She expects a guest room, Marcus. She expects to be entertained. She expects. She's my mother. A long silence. When Serena spoke again, her voice was lower and I could not make out the words. I put down my book. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about the building in downtown Charleston where Marcus's architectural firm has its Southeast regional office. I thought about the name on the lease. I thought about the lease renewal coming up in September. I thought about Richard sitting on our back porch in 2001, saying you'll know what to do with it. I picked up my book again. I said nothing. Marcus drove me to the airport on the morning of Valentine's Day. He had risen earlier than usual, which I noticed and found touching until I understood why. We were in the car, his car a large black SUV that Serena had selected that costs approximately what my parents' house cost in 1975, when he said it. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the ticket." "All right," I said. "I booked it initially, but I actually had to cancel it. Something came up with the firm." I turned to look at him. He was watching the road. "You canceled my flight. The timing was bad. Serena and I have a thing tonight. It's Valentine's. We have reservations, and I needed to handle a few things before that. and he made a brief gesture with one hand, the gesture of a man who is moving pieces around a board. Your return was flexible, I thought. You can book another one through the app. Whatever works for your schedule. I see, I said. He pulled up to the departures curb. He put the car in park. I would have called ahead, but it was pretty last minute. He looked at me. He was not unkind in that moment. He was something more difficult than unkind. He was simply not thinking very hard about what he was doing. You'll be fine, right? You can handle it. Of course, I said. I got out of the car. I got my suitcase from the back. He had lowered the window. Love you, Mom, he said. Then, and perhaps he thought this was helpful, figure out. You're a grown woman. And then he drove away. I stood at the curb. The wind moved through me. The mountains were clear and cold and very far away. I reached into my purse. I found a contact. I pressed call. If this story is already finding its way under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe to Margaret Reed, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She always said the ones who stay quiet longest know the most. Let's see if that's true. The Centurion Lounge at Denver International is on the beat concourse, past security, past the underground train, past the place where the airport opens up into something that almost feels like a city. I have been a member for 11 years. I have never mentioned this to Marcus or Serena or anyone in my family. My card is in my wallet behind my library card and in front of my health savings account card, and no one has ever thought to ask what it is. I checked in at the desk. The woman at the counter, young, dark-haired, with a particular warmth of someone who has been trained to make people feel recognized, smiled when she saw my card. Mrs. Voss, welcome back. Can I get you set up at a table? Please, I said. Somewhere quiet, if you have it. She walked me to a corner table near the windows. The lounge was half full. Business travelers, a few couples, one family with a sleeping toddler and a carrier. Outside the windows, aircraft moved in their patient, enormous way across the tarmac. I sat down. I ordered a glass of still water and a pot of Earl Grey. I took out my phone. Diana had sent the confirmation while I was still standing at the curb outside departures. First class on the 7:15 to Charlotte, connecting to Charleston. I had 6 hours before my flight. I'm going to tell you what I did with those 6 hours because it matters. First, I called my sister Roberta in Savannah. Roberta is 71 and has the directness of someone who grew up in a house where there was not enough time for indirection. He canceled your flight, she said, when I had told her. He did, and drove away. Yes, a silence. I could hear her television in the background, which she turns down but never off. Eleanor, Roberta said, in the tone she uses when she is about to say something she has been holding for longer than the conversation has lasted. You have been patient with that boy for 9 years. I have watched you be patient. Mama watched you be patient before she died. And she said to me, I never told you this. She said, Eleanor has more grace than any of us, but grace without a spine is just good manners. I laughed. It surprised me, the laugh, full and genuine, the kind that releases something. Mama said that. She did. She loved Marcus. You know she did. But she saw it early, the way he took things. Roberta paused. What are you going to do? I'm thinking, I said. You've been thinking for 9 years. I've been deciding, I said. There's a difference. Another silence. Then Roberta, well, decide something then. After I ended the call with Roberta, I sat for a while with my tea and watched the aircraft move. I thought about Marcus at 12 years old, taking apart the radio I kept in the kitchen and leaving the pieces on the counter because he had lost interest before he finished. I thought about Marcus at 22, calling from his first apartment in Charlotte to ask if I could send a check because he had overextended on his credit card. I thought about Marcus at 35, showing me photographs of the Denver house they were thinking of buying. Enormous, beautiful, the kind of house that exists to announce something to the world, and saying offhandedly, it's a bit of a stretch, but Serena loves it. I thought about the way he had looked at that house in those photographs, the slightly glazed quality of his expression, a man who has arrived at a life that is larger than his center of gravity. I'm not telling you Marcus is a bad man. He is not a bad man. He is a man who has grown comfortable in the particular way that happens when comfort arrives without cost. When you have not had to learn the value of something because it has always simply been there. I thought about Lily. Her face when she held the sketchbook. "Grandma, you drew me every week. That is who I'm doing this for, if I am being completely honest. Not for myself. I have what I need. I am fine. I have been fine for 22 years. I am doing this for the child who is growing up in that house learning what a woman's worth is measured in, and what it looks like when a family mistakes patience for weakness." I took out my small notebook. I keep one always the way my mother kept her green notebook because some habits are inherited so deeply they become character, and I began to write. I wrote for 2 hours. I will not tell you everything I wrote because some of it was private, the kind of thinking you do when you're finally giving yourself permission to do it. But I will tell you some of it. I wrote, "The King Street property lease expires in September. Marcus's firm is the tenant. They are paying below market." I wrote, "The Folly Beach property is in my name. Marcus believes it was sold in 2008. It was not sold. It was rented. It has been rented for 16 years to a family who would very much like to purchase it." I wrote, "The investment accounts that Diana manages have not been touched since 2019. In that time, they have grown by approximately 40%. I wrote, "Marcus is a grown woman's son. He is capable of figuring things out." And then I wrote, "The question is not whether to act. The question is how to act in a way that is proportional, dignified, and, if there is any grace left between us, recoverable." I ordered a second pot of tea. I ate something from a buffet, small sandwiches, fruit, a piece of very good cheese. The lounge filled and thinned around me. Afternoon light moved across the windows. At 3 o'clock, I called Diana. "The King Street lease?" I said. "Yes," said Diana, who does not require preamble. "When it comes up for renewal in September, I'd like to reconsider the terms." A brief pause. "Market rate would represent a significant increase." "I'm aware," I said. "I'd also like a full accounting of all properties where current tenants are not at market rate. Any property where the tenant, regardless of who they are, is receiving a discount that isn't formalized in writing." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mrs. Voss," Diana said carefully, "are you thinking about restructuring the entire portfolio?" "I'm thinking about clarity," I said. "I want everything I own to be transparent, documented, and valued correctly. If people are receiving benefits from my assets, I want those benefits to be intentional and acknowledged, not assumed." "Understood," she said. And then, because Diana has known me for 22 years and does not always stay on the professional side of the line, "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," I said. "Everything is, in fact, quite clear." I returned to my table. I finished my tea. At 5 o'clock, I moved to the departures board area to wait for boarding, and at 7:15, I settled into my first-class seat. Wide, warm, the particular luxury of being given space. And I ordered a glass of champagne I did not need and drank it with the slow attention of someone who has decided to notice the good things. The flight attendant, a woman perhaps 10 years younger than me, with the ease of someone deeply competent at her work, looked at my boarding pass when she brought the champagne. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "lovely to have you with us this evening." I thought about the departures curb at Denver International. I thought about my son driving away. "Thank you," I said. "It's a lovely evening to be going home. I should tell you about my house in Charleston, because it is part of the story. It is not a large house. I want to be clear about this. I did not sell Richard's portfolio and move into a mansion on the Battery. I'm not that kind of woman, and I was not raised to be. My house is a double-wide row house on a quiet street in the Harleston Village neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen I have renovated exactly once in 30 years, a back garden that I tend myself because I find it useful to tend things with my own hands. What I have added to the house since Richard died is quiet and intentional. Good furniture, chosen slowly and kept for decades. A library that fills the back room and has grown over 22 years into something a person could spend a life in. A painting above the fireplace that Richard gave me on our 15th anniversary. A small oil of the harbor at dawn, the light on the water rendered in a way that still makes me stop when I pass it. The house does not announce itself. Neither do I. My neighbors know me as Eleanor Voss, retired teacher, widow, grandmother, the woman who tends her garden on Saturday mornings and brings soup to people when they are sick and walks to the farmer's market on Sunday with a canvas bag that she has been using since 1998. They do not know, and I have not told them, that the commercial building 3 blocks north on King Street is mine. They do not know that the restored Victorian on Folly Beach that various family vacationers have rented for 16 years is mine. They do not know that the investment account Diana manages has, over 22 years of careful stewardship, grown into something that would require a different vocabulary than the one my life appears to use. This is how I have chosen to live. I chose it consciously after Richard died. I chose it because I watched what happened to people who allowed their wealth to define their presentation, and I did not want that. I chose it because my mother tracked every dollar in a green notebook and found genuine satisfaction in a life that was sufficient, and I respected that satisfaction enough to replicate its spirit in a different register. I chose it because Richard built what he built quietly, without performance, out of real intelligence and real patience, and I wanted to honor that by doing the same. I also chose it because I had 2 children, and I wanted to see who they would become before I told them what existed. I wanted to know whether Marcus would be kind to me without the knowledge of what he might inherit. I wanted to know whether Claire, my daughter, who lives in Asheville and calls me every Sunday and visited last April with her 2 children and filled my house with the pleasant noise of people who enjoy being together, was gentle to me because of what she felt or because of what she expected. Claire, I want to say, has always been kind without calculation. She calls because she misses me. She visits because the children love me. She has never once asked what I plan to do with the house or the savings or anything else. She is 40 years old and lives simply and is raising her children in a way that would make Richard proud. When she calls on Sundays, she asks how I am sleeping, whether I've been to the garden, what I'm reading, whether Mrs. Hennessy next door has recovered from her hip surgery. She asks, in other words, about my life. Marcus calls on the 4th Tuesday of most months, which tells you something about the relationship without my having to editorialize further. My children do not know, neither of them, the full extent of what Richard built and what I have continued. Claire does not know because it has not come up. She does not ask about money because she does not think about money the way people think about money when they are hoping to receive it. Marcus does not know because I have not told him and he has not asked, except once in 2019 when he said offhandedly over dinner, "I keep meaning to ask, Mom, what did Dad's properties actually sell for when you liquidated?" I told him. Some of them sold well, some less so. The timing was complicated, which was true. Some properties did sell, others did not. Marcus heard what he expected to hear and went back to his wine, and I went back to mine, and we moved on to other topics. He assumed. I confirmed nothing. That is the line I have walked for 22 years. But I want to tell you about what he does not know specifically, because it is about to matter. He does not know that his architectural firm, Marcus Voss Architecture, which he founded in 2010 and which has grown into a respected mid-sized firm with offices in Charleston and Denver, rents its Charleston office space from a holding company called Voss Properties, LLC. He has never looked up who owns Voss Properties, LLC. He has never had any reason to. The rent on that office space is, as I mentioned to Diana, below market. It has been below market since 2010, when Marcus was starting out and the space was available, and I was a woman who had quietly made a decision and told no one about it. I'm not telling you this to paint myself as some kind of puppeteer. I am telling you because in a story about a woman who appears to have nothing and turns out to hold everything, it matters that the everything was not accumulated through scheming. It was accumulated through work, through patience, through the particular intelligence that comes from paying attention over a very long time. Richard built it. I grew it, and I have spent 15 years deciding what to do with it. The afternoon after I flew home to Charleston, the 15th of February, a Tuesday, I woke in my own bed in my own house with the harbor light coming through my curtain the way it does in winter, flat and silver and beautiful. I made coffee. I sat in the back garden for 20 minutes in my coat, listening to the birds. I thought about Marcus at the curb. Figure it out, Mom. You're a grown woman. I thought about Serena in the kitchen. The mugs on the left are for guests. I thought about Lily, holding the sketchbook against her chest. I went inside. I called Diana. Let's talk about September, I said. if you're still with me, and thank you for staying, truly. I want to make sure you understand something before I tell you what happened next. I did not act immediately after Denver. This is important because the story of a woman who is wronged and immediately retaliates is a different story than this one. That story is satisfying in a different way, faster, cleaner, more like a match struck. This story is more like what happens after the match, the thing that actually catches and what it illuminates when it does. I went home to Charleston. I tended my garden. I finished the novel I had been reading. I had dinner with my friend Marguerite, who has known me since 1978 and who has the particular gift of asking questions that sound like they are about the weather and are actually about the weather of your soul. I went to church. I walked to the farmer's market with my canvas bag, and I watched. I want to tell you what watching looks like when you have spent 68 years becoming very good at it. It does not look like surveillance. It does not look like resentment collecting itself into a plan. It looks, from the outside, like a woman living her quiet life in her row house in Harleston Village, tending her garden and reading her books and speaking to her grandchildren on video calls with the easy warmth of someone who has nowhere else to be. On the inside, it looks like clarity accumulating. I watch my phone. Marcus called twice in the 2 weeks after Denver, both times on his fourth Tuesday schedule, both times brief, both times without the word sorry appearing in any form. He did not apologize for canceling my flight. He did not ask how I had managed to get home. He did not ask what I had paid for the return ticket, which would have been the minimum level of consideration a person might extend. I noted this without drama. I added it to what I was building. In early March, Lily called me, which she does not often do on her own initiative because she is 10 and 10-year-olds do not generally call their grandmothers without prompting, but Lily is not entirely typical. She called on a Saturday morning and she said, "Grandma, I show Mom the sketchbook." What did she say? I asked. A small pause. The particular pause of a child choosing their words carefully because they have already learned that some truths require wrapping. She said it was very sweet, Lily said. I understood. I changed the subject. We talked about horses for 20 minutes. In mid-March, Marcus called, not on his usual Tuesday, which caught my attention immediately, and said, "Mom, I want to let you know that we're thinking about coming to Charleston in May. Serena has a conference there, and we thought we'd make a trip of it." "That sounds lovely," I said. "We were thinking we'd stay at a hotel. Serena likes having her own space when she's working, but we'd want to see you. Maybe a dinner or two." "Of course," I said. "You're not offended by the hotel thing." It was not quite a question. I recognized the construction. It was the one people use when they want reassurance without asking for it directly. "Marcus," I said, "you're 42 years old. You can stay where you like." A brief silence. Then "Good. Thanks, Mom." After I hung up, I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand. Serena likes having her own space when she's working. What Serena likes in this context is not being required to stay in my guest room, which is comfortable and private and does not lack for anything, but which would mean being in my house, in my territory, with my guest mugs and my 30-year-old kitchen and my library that takes up the whole back room. What Serena likes is the specific freedom of someone who has decided that I am a visit, not a home. I made note. I called Diana. "What's the occupancy rate on the Folly Beach property right now?" I asked. "Fully booked through September," Diana said. "The Hendersons are in residence through July, and I have 2 families inquiring for August." "What are comparable properties selling for in that area right now?" Diana told me. The number was, shall we say, significant. "The Hendersons have expressed interest in purchasing," Diana said. "I know," I said. "Tell them I'll think about it." "Of course. Shall I also tell them there may be a discussion in the coming months?" "Tell them I'm a patient woman," I said. "Tell them good things come to those who wait." Diana laughed. It was the laugh of a woman who has been managing someone's money for 2 decades and has developed, over time, a genuine respect for the person on the other end. "Is there anything else?" she asked. "One more thing," I said. "The King Street lease. Can you give me a full accounting of what Marcus's firm has paid in rent since 2010 versus what the market rate would have been over that same period?" A pause. The sound of keys. "You want to know the full value of the discount," Diana said. "I want to know the full picture," I said. Marcus and Serena arrived in Charleston on the 14th of May, 3 months, almost to the day, after Denver. They were staying at the Dewberry Hotel on Meeting Street, which is exactly the kind of hotel Serena selects. Beautiful, expensive, the sort of place where every surface has been chosen by someone whose job is to choose surfaces. I had offered, of course, to host them at the house. Marcus had said, warmly, with the ease of someone who has been coached on wording, that they appreciated it, but Serena was presenting at her conference and needed to be in the thick of things. I said, of course. I meant something else. Lily was not with them. She was at school. This was the first time since the Denver visit that I was seeing Marcus and Serena, without Lily between us, and I noticed the difference the moment I opened the door for them on the evening of their arrival. Without Lily, there is no warm current in the room. Without Lily, Serena and I are two women in a house who have been polite to each other for 9 years and are now experiencing, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what that politeness has been covering. I had cooked. I want you to know this. I had made my mother's groundnut stew and rice and a green salad and a chocolate cake from a recipe I have been using since 1985. I had set the table in the dining room with the tablecloth I used for company and the good dishes that had been my mother-in-law's. I had put flowers from the garden in the center of the table, camellias, which were blooming, and some early roses. Serena walked in and looked at the table. She said, "Eleanor, you really didn't have to go to all this trouble." The sentence is unobjectionable. The tone tells you everything. Trouble was the word. As in, this is trouble for you, as in, this level of effort implies a need that you perhaps should have managed differently. "It was no trouble," I said. "Please sit down." Marcus ate well. He always eats well. Food is one of the places where he still becomes, briefly, the boy I raised, unguarded and present, and genuinely delighted. He had 2 helpings of the stew and 3 pieces of bread, and he said, "Mom, this is incredible in the way that still, after all these years, reaches something in me that is not calcified." Serena ate sparingly and said the food was lovely. She was on her phone more than she wasn't. After dinner, when I was clearing the plates, I heard her say to Marcus in the kitchen doorway, in the low voice she uses that travels further than she realizes, "We should get back. I want to review my presentation before morning." Marcus said, "We just got here." Serena said, "We've been here for 3 hours." Marcus said, "She cooked." A pause. "Marcus," Serena said, and I heard, in the way she said his name, the full architecture of their relationship, what she expected, what she required, the particular grammar of a marriage where one person's comfort is perpetually prioritized. I came back into the dining room with the dessert plates. I set them down. I said, "I know you have an early morning, Serena. Let me wrap up some cake for you to take back." I said it warmly. I meant every word of it. And I also meant, I see you. I have always seen you. And I have been deciding for years what to do about it. They left at 9:30. Marcus hugged me at the door, longer this time, which I noticed. Something in him, that evening, seemed to be doing the work of noticing, though I was not sure what he was noticing yet. "It's good to be back," he said. "Charleston feels different lately. Like something's changing." "Things are always changing," I said. "That's the nature of places. Of most things." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't fully read. Then he smiled, the genuine smile, the one that is still entirely his own, and said good night. I closed the door. I went back to my dining room. I sat at the table with the flowers and the remains of the chocolate cake, and I poured myself a small glass of the bourbon I keep for evenings that require it. I thought about September. I want to tell you the exact moment I stopped deciding and started moving. It was the 3rd week of May. Marcus and Serena had been back in Denver for a week. I was in my garden on a Saturday morning, in the particular piece of a Charleston morning in late spring. Warm already, the smell of the roses, the sound of Mrs. Hennessy's wind chimes next door, when my phone rang. It was Lily. "Grandma," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Always," I said. A pause. The specific pause of a child who is not sure how to say what they need to say. "Mom and Dad were talking last night," she said, "about money. They didn't know I was awake." Another pause. They said they think the rent on the Charleston office is going up. And Dad was upset. He said it was going to affect the whole firm. I put down my trowel. I sat down on the garden bench. "Lily," I said carefully, "is that all they said?" Dad said she stopped. Stopped again. He said he wished Grandma had more money, so she could help. I sat with that for a moment. Then Lily said, in the voice she uses when she is saying something that has cost her something to form, "Grandma, I don't understand why Dad talks about you like that sometimes. Like you need to be like." She stopped. "I think you're the best person I know. I don't understand why he talks like you're not." I looked at the roses. I looked at the camellias. I looked at the piece of the harbor I can see from the far corner of my garden if I stand at the right angle, the light on the water that Richard gave me in oil paint and that I've been walking past for 40 years. "Lily," I said, "do you know what your great-great-grandmother used to say?" "What?" "She used to say that a river doesn't announce itself. It just moves. A silence." Then, with the particular gravity of a 10-year-old who is taking something seriously, "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that the things that shape the landscape do not always make noise about it first." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Grandma, are you going to do something?" I looked at the harbor. "I've been doing something for a very long time, sweetheart," I said. "It's just becoming visible now." After I hung up with Lily, I went inside. I washed my hands. I sat at the desk in my library, in the chair where I have made most of the significant decisions of my adult life, and I called Diana. "September," I said. "I made my decision." Diana said, "Tell me." I told her. When I finished, there was a silence. Then Diana said, "Mrs. Voss, I have been managing this portfolio for 22 years. I have waited for you to make this call for approximately 15 of them." "That long?" I said. "I suspected you were deciding," she said. "You are a very thorough decision-maker." "I wanted to be certain," I said. "About all of it. About him, about what he is, about whether it was the right time. And now?" Diana said. "Now," I said, "I am certain." "Then let's begin," Diana said. "If this story has found you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Margaret Reed. The best ones are still coming, and the people who watch to the end are exactly the ones who need to hear them. What I did next, I did quietly. This is consistent with my nature and also with my understanding of how significant things work. Not with a proclamation, not with a confrontation, but with a series of small, precise, irreversible actions, taken in the correct order, that collectively produce a result no single action could achieve alone. I authorized Diana to formally restructure Arvas Properties, LLC. The restructuring was legal, clean, thoroughly documented. What it accomplished, in practical terms, was this: the below-market lease on the King Street office space, the space Marcus's firm had occupied since 2010, the space for which they had been paying what amounted to 15 years of below-market rent, was now flagged for renewal in September at current market rate. The increase, Diana confirmed, was substantial, not punishing, not vindictive, simply accurate. The market in that area of King Street had moved significantly in 15 years, as markets in desirable urban corridors tend to do. I also authorized Diana to prepare the Folly Beach property for a formal sale to the Henderson family, who had been renting it for 16 years and who were, at this point, family friends in the way that long-term tenants sometimes become. The sale would be conducted at a fair market price. The proceeds would go into the trust. I had my will reviewed, not changed, reviewed, updated in small details, signed with fresh witnesses. My estate lawyer, a composed woman named Patricia Haynes, who has handled my affairs since 2006, called me the afternoon after we finished to say, with the professional neutrality of a woman who has seen many things, "Everything is in order, Eleanor. Very clearly in order." "Good," I said. "I find clarity restful." I made one more call. This one was to the director of the Charleston Museum, where Richard and I had been donors for 30 years. I had been thinking, I told him, about the possibility of endowing a gallery in Richard's name. We had spoken about it years ago, briefly, and I wanted to revisit the conversation. He was delighted. We scheduled a meeting for June. None of this was visible. None of it made noise. To the outside world, to Marcus, to Serena, to anyone who might be watching, I was still Eleanor Voss, retired schoolteacher, grandmother, woman with the garden and the row house and the canvas bag on Sunday mornings. But the river was moving. In the first week of June, Marcus called, not on his Tuesday, again, which I was beginning to understand as a sign that something in his peripheral vision was creating static. Mom, he said, I got a renewal notice on the King Street space. Oh, I said, the rent is going up. A pause. Significantly. I see, I said. It's a significant increase. It's going to affect our operating costs in the Southeast office pretty substantially. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Commercial real estate in that area has been moving quite a bit. Another pause. Longer. Do you know anything about that building? Who owns it? Why would I know who owns a commercial building on King Street? I said. My voice was warm, curious. The voice of a woman who has absolutely no reason to know anything about commercial real estate. I don't know, Marcus said. I thought maybe, with Dad having been in real estate. Your father sold his properties, I said. Years ago. You know that. A silence. Right, Marcus said. Yeah, of course. After I hung up, I sat for a moment in my library. I looked at Richard's painting above the fireplace. I looked at the harbor light on the water. I thought, not yet, but soon. In the third week of June, Marcus called again. This time his voice had a different quality, still controlled, still the voice of a man who is accustomed to being competent, but with something beneath it that I had not heard in years. Something younger, something slightly uncertain. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be straight with me. I'm always straight with you, I said, which was true. I had never lied to Marcus. I had simply not offered information he had not thought to ask for. The King Street building, he said. I had someone look into the ownership. I waited. It's owned by a company called Arvas Properties. I said nothing. Mom, Marcus said. Arvas. That's Dad's name. It is, I said. A very long silence. Mom, he said, and his voice had changed entirely now. The competence was still there, but beneath it something that was almost not a word yet, something on its way to becoming a question or an understanding or a grief. Mom, what is Arvas Properties? I picked up my tea. I looked out the library window at the camellias in the garden. Marcus, I said, I think it's time we had a conversation that is overdue by approximately 20 years. When can you come to Charleston? Marcus arrived in Charleston on the second Saturday of July. He came alone. He had not told Serena the full reason for the trip. He told her he needed to handle some things related to the Charleston office, which was true, and he had not told her the rest, which I noted without comment. There are many ways to understand a marriage, and one of them is watching what a person chooses not to share with their spouse and why. He drove from the airport. He parked on my street, which is narrow and lined with old oaks whose roots have been lifting the sidewalk for 40 years. I watched from the front window as he sat in his rental car for a moment before getting out. A still moment, the kind a person takes when they are preparing themselves for something they cannot quite name yet. I had made coffee. I had put out the good cups, not the guest mugs, not the ones on the left. The ones Richard and I had used every morning for 20 years. The ones that came back from Portugal in 1994 in a bag that barely survived the overhead bin. Wide and deep blue, the color of the harbor in summer. Marcus knocked. I opened the door. He looked, if I'm being precise about it, like a man who has recently discovered that the floor of the room he has been standing in is made of something different than he thought. Not collapsed, not fallen, but suddenly uncertain in a way that changes how you place your feet. Mom, he said. Come in, I said. Coffee's ready. We sat in the library. I had known we would end up in the library. It is where I think, where I decide, where the important conversations happen. The books are there, and Richard's painting, and the particular quality of light that comes through the south window in the morning. It is the room that is most entirely mine, and it was time for Marcus to see it clearly. He sat across from me. He held his coffee in both hands the way he did as a boy. For a moment, just a moment, he was 12 again, sitting at the kitchen table after something had gone wrong at school, waiting for me to make it make sense. I let him have the silence for a moment. Then I said, What did the ownership search tell you? Arvas Properties LLC, he said, registered in South Carolina. The registered agent is a law firm downtown, Haynes and Whitmore. He paused. Patricia Haynes. That's your lawyer. She is, I said. Mom. He set down his coffee. Is Arvas Properties, is that yours? It is, I said. He looked at me. His expression was the one I had been waiting to see for 20 years. Not anger, not calculation, but something genuine and unguarded. Something that was actually Marcus, stripped of the easy confidence and the moderate disinterest and the Fourth Tuesday phone calls. For how long? He said. The company was established in 2003, I said. The year after your father died. He was quiet for a moment. The King Street building. Yes. We've been renting from you. From Arvas Properties, I said. Yes. Since you opened the Charleston office in 2010. He pressed his fingers against his forehead, a gesture from childhood, the one he makes when he is recalculating something. For 15 years. 13, technically. The office opened in 2010, and the first lease was signed in 2011. But yes, 13 years. At below market rent, he said. It was not quite a question. Considerably below market, I said. I made a decision when you were starting the firm. I wanted to give you a foundation. I did not want you to know where it was coming from because I knew you would have complicated feelings about it, and the work of starting a business was complicated enough without adding that. A long silence. Why are you telling me now? He said. I looked at him steadily. Because the lease is coming up for renewal, and it will be renewing at market rate. And because you called me in June and asked, and I had decided that if you asked directly, it was time to answer directly. He absorbed this. I watched him absorb it. The recalibration happening behind his face, the mental arithmetic of 13 years of below-market rent being recast from a business expense into something else entirely. How much? He started. He stopped. What's the difference between what we paid and market rate? Over 13 years, I said. Diana estimates the discount amounts to approximately $340,000. Marcus put down his coffee cup. He did not speak for a full 30 seconds. $340,000, he said. Approximately, I said. Diana can give you the precise figure if you'd like it. Who is Diana? Diana Marsh. She manages my portfolio. She worked with your father for years before he died. You met her twice, I believe, at the funeral and the following year. You were distracted both times, which is understandable. Another silence. Longer. Mom, Marcus said. Well, don't I know? And I told him. I told him all of it. I told him about the Folly Beach property. The one he had assumed was sold in 2008, which was still mine, which had been generating rental income for 16 years and was now in the process of being sold to the Henderson family at fair market value. I told him about the portfolio Diana managed, the investments Richard had made and I had continued, the ones that had grown over 22 years of careful stewardship into something that required a recalibration of every assumption Marcus had made about my circumstances. I told him about the meeting at the Charleston Museum, about Richard's name on a gallery wall. I told him, quietly and without drama, the full shape of what existed. He listened. He did not interrupt. I had not seen Marcus listen this completely since he was a child. The particular quality of attention that means a person is not preparing their response, but actually receiving what is being said. When I finished, he sat for a long time. Then he said, "You've had this the whole time." "Yes," I said. "And you never told us." "No," I said. "Why?" I had thought about this answer for a long time. Not in the way you think about something when you're preparing a speech, but in the way you think about something when you are genuinely trying to understand your own reasons. I had turned it over for years, in this chair, looking at this painting, watching the light change on the harbor. Because I needed to know who you were first, I said. I needed to know whether you were kind to me because of what I meant to you, or because of what you hoped I would eventually give you. That is a thing a parent needs to know about their child. It is not a comfortable thing to need to know, but I needed to know it. Marcus was very still, and, he said, his voice was quiet, careful, and I said, "You are not cruel, Marcus. I want to be clear about that. You are not a cruel man, but you have become comfortable. You have become the kind of man who cancels his mother's flight home and drives away because there is something else he needs to get to, and who does not call to apologize, and who did not think to ask what she paid to get home, and who said figure out to a woman standing in 11-degree wind as if she were an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be considered. He did not flinch from this. That was the thing that surprised me. He did not deflect, did not explain, did not offer the softening counter-narrative that comfortable people usually reach for when they're confronted with the truth of their comfort. He sat with it. I didn't apologize, he said. No, I said. For Denver. No. He looked at his hands, then at the painting above the fireplace, then at me. I'm sorry, he said. And it was, I want to be precise, the real thing. Not the practice thing, not the smoothed-over thing. The actual thing, arriving late and imperfect and genuine. I'm sorry for Denver. I'm sorry for the way things have been. I looked at my son. Richard used to say that the most important thing a person can do when they have been wrong is simply to be wrong, to stand in it without minimizing it, to let it be what it is. He said the people who could do that were the ones worth staying close to. Marcus was sitting in the wrong. Not comfortably, but honestly. Thank you, I said. That matters to me. A long silence. Outside, the camellias moved in the morning breeze. Mrs. Hennessy's wind chimes said something from next door. Serena, Marcus said. It was not quite a sentence. Yes, I said. She doesn't, he stopped. Started again. She has never been. Another stop. He was searching, and I let him search because a person needs to find their own words for certain things. She has never been easy with you, he said finally. And I have let that happen. I have let it happen for 9 years, and I have told myself it was just personality differences, or you were both adjusting, or he pressed his fingers to his forehead again. I let it happen. You did, I said. And he looked at me. At Denver. At the airport. I knew she would prefer. It was easier to. I said what I said because it was the path of least resistance, I said. Yes, I know. He nodded. The nod of the man who has just had something named correctly that has not previously been named. I don't want to be that man, he said. I know you don't, I said. I have always known you don't want to be that man. The question has been whether you were willing to do the work of becoming the other one. We sat together in the library for another hour. We talked about Richard, about what he had built and how and why, and what he had hoped for both of them. We talked about Claire, whom Marcus called that afternoon from my kitchen, a conversation I did not listen to, but whose tone I could hear through the wall. Careful, genuine, the sound of a brother who is doing the work of recalibrating. We talked about Lily. She loves you in a way that is not ordinary, I told him. She sees you the way good people see the people who matter to them, clearly, without the softening that comes from wanting something. Do not let her learn that the women in your life are guests in their own lives. Marcus looked at me for a long time. Is that what you've been? He said. A guest? In your home? I said. Yes. I've been a guest with the guest mugs on the left, and no one has asked me whether I find that comfortable. He looked away, then back. I'm going to fix that, he said. I believe you, I said. I am simply going to let you show me. What I am about to tell you is the part that belongs to witnesses. I did not arrange for it to happen in front of witnesses. That is not my way, and it was not Richard's way. The things that matter most happen quietly, in rooms, between people who are paying attention. The witnesses arrive afterward, and what they see is the shape of what has already become true. But witnesses there were. In August, Patricia Haynes, my estate lawyer, hosted what she described as a routine meeting to finalize the restructuring of several holding companies, the sale of the Folly Beach property, and updated documentation on the trust. She had invited Diana as asset manager. She had invited me. Marcus had asked, after our July conversation, if he could attend. He said he wanted to understand the full picture. I said yes. What he had not told Serena about. Serena arrived with Marcus. I did not engineer this. I want to be honest about that. Marcus had told her, apparently, only that there was a legal meeting related to Charleston real estate that had some relevance to the firm's office space. Serena, who has always had the instinct of someone who understands that important conversations about money should be attended, had decided to come. Patricia Haynes's conference room is on the 4th floor of a building on Broad Street, with a view of the steeple of St. Michael's Church. It is a serious room. Dark wood, good light, the particular atmosphere of a place where significant things are transacted. Patricia herself is 60, composed, impeccably dressed, and has the quality of someone who has seen enough to be surprised by very little. She shook Marcus's hand when he arrived. She shook Serena's. Then she turned to me. Mrs. Voss, she said, with the warmth of 20 years. Shall we begin? I sat at the head of the table. Diana sat to my right. Patricia at the end. Marcus and Serena across from Diana on the other side. Serena looked at the seating arrangement. Something moved across her face, a small recalibration, quickly managed, a woman who is very good at adjusting to new information in real time. Patricia opened the meeting with the routine items. The Henderson sale, the Folly Beach property, was finalized. She presented the documents. The number was on the page. Serena's eyes moved to it with the efficiency of a person who has been reading financial documents for years. I watched her read it. Then Diana walked through the portfolio restructuring. This is where I will tell you what happened in that room, as precisely as I can. Diana is 63 years old and has the particular elegance of a woman who has spent her life in rooms full of very wealthy people and has never been especially impressed by any of them. She presented the restructured portfolio with the calm confidence of someone delivering a weather report. Not dramatic, not theatrical, simply accurate. She went through the properties. She went through the accounts. She went through the trust structure and the updated documentation. The numbers on the pages were the numbers they were. I watched Serena's face. I have been watching Serena's face for 9 years. I know its registers, the warmth that is not quite warmth, the smile that is precisely calibrated, the particular quality of attention she extends to people who have something she might need. I know what it looks like when she is managing a situation and what it looks like when the situation has moved outside the perimeter of what she can manage. Halfway through Diana's presentation, Serena's face moved outside that perimeter. It was not dramatic. She did not gasp. She did not make a scene. She is far too practiced for any of that. But there was a moment, one moment, between one number on a page and Diana's calm continuation, where Serena's composure did the thing that composure does when it encounters something it was not prepared for. It held, and then, for just a second, it didn't. Marcus was watching Diana and the documents. He had seen these numbers before, or something close to them. He had been in the library in July. He had had the conversation. He had had weeks to begin the process of understanding. He was still recalibrating, but he was doing it from a foundation of prior information. Serena had no such foundation. Serena was encountering, for the first time, the full picture of Eleanor Voss. Not the retired schoolteacher with the guest mugs and the worn carry-on, not the woman to be managed and seated separately and handed candles from a clearance bin at TJ Maxx, but the woman who had spent 22 years quietly, thoroughly, building something that was real. Patricia concluded the formal part of the meeting. She slid a final document across the table toward me, the updated trust signed and witnessed. She looked at Serena, then at Marcus. Then, with the particular composure of a woman who has been waiting patiently for a long time, back at me. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "is there anything else you'd like to address today?" "Just one thing," I said. I reached into my folder. I took out a single page and passed it across the table to Marcus. It was the accounting Diana had prepared in June. The 13 years of rent on the King Street office, the market rate comparison, the cumulative difference. Marcus looked at it. He had seen a version of this in July. He passed it to Serena without a word. Serena read it. When she looked up, she was looking at me. Not with the managing look, not with the guest mugs look, with the look of someone who has just understood the precise dimensions of the room they have been standing in and found them to be considerably different from what they imagined. "The lease renewal," I said to Marcus, "will be at market rate. Diana has the paperwork ready. I wanted you to understand the full context before you signed anything." "I understand," Marcus said. "I also want you to understand," I said, "that the 13 years at below market rate was a choice I made for you. Not a mistake, not an oversight. A decision. I made it because I wanted to help you build something, and because I could, and because at the time I believed it was the right thing to do." I paused. "I'm telling you now, because I believe you are ready to know it. And because the kind of help that is not acknowledged is not, ultimately, help. It is just the invisible labor of a woman who has decided not to be seen." The room was very quiet. Marcus nodded. Once. Slowly. Serena said nothing. But something had changed in her face, something that I will tell you is not, if I am reading it correctly after 9 years of watching her performance. Something that looked, underneath the shock and the recalibration and the particular discomfort of a woman who has been wrong in front of witnesses, like the beginning of something honest. I did not raise my voice. I did not deliver a speech. I did not enumerate the slights and the guest mugs and the canceled flights and the maid's room and the clearance candles and the years of being managed like a piece of furniture that does not quite fit. People who have to explain what they are worth are usually arguing with someone who has already decided. I was not interested in arguing. What I did in the following order. The King Street lease renewed in September at market rate. The increase was absorbed by Marcus's firm, which, as I had known it would, because Marcus is in fact competent at his work, managed it. It required restructuring some operating costs. It required Marcus having a real conversation with his partners about the financial foundation of the Charleston office that he had perhaps not had previously in its full honesty. It was difficult, and it was clarifying, and it was the kind of difficulty that produces something worthwhile on the other side. The Folly Beach sale closed in October. The proceeds went into the trust. Patricia sent me the final documents on a Thursday afternoon, and I signed them at my desk, and then I went and sat in the garden for a while in the October light, which in Charleston has a particular quality. Golden, warm still, the camellias beginning their autumn bloom. And I thought about Richard, who had bought that property in 1994 and said it was for the family, but really bought it because he loved the light on the water at Folly Beach at dawn. I told the museum yes in November. The gallery will carry Richard's name. It will open in the spring. These things I did regardless of what happened with Marcus and Serena, because they were the right things to do and because I had been deciding them for a long time and the deciding was finished. But then there was the other part. In late September, Serena called me. She called on a Sunday, which she has never done. Sundays have always been the day I call, the day Marcus sometimes answers, the day Serena can be heard in the background doing something else. She called me. She asked if she could come to Charleston alone, without Marcus. I said yes. She came on the first Saturday of October. I had not cooked this time. I did not want to perform for her, and I did not want her to feel performed for. I made tea. I put on the kitchen table, not the dining room, not the library. The kitchen, where the ordinary things happen, where real conversations tend to arrive. She sat down. She put her hands flat on the table the way people do when they are trying to keep themselves from retreating. I owe you an apology, she said. I have owed you an apology for years, and I did not know how to give it, because I think I told myself you didn't notice. She stopped. I told myself you were too, that you were too soft, I said gently, too accommodating, too much the kind of woman who doesn't push back. She looked at me. Yes, I was not accommodating, I said. I was watching. A silence. I know that now, she said. She apologized. It was not a perfect apology. She is not a woman for whom perfect apologies come easily, and I am not a woman who requires them to be perfect to receive them. It was honest. She said the specific things she was sorry for, which I appreciated. The mugs, the seating at holiday tables, the hotel instead of the guest room, the way she had talked about me when she thought I could not hear. The clearance candles. She said, the candles. And then she stopped, and I thought for a moment she might not recover, but she did. I picked those up in 20 minutes at TJ Maxx on the way to the airport. I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it, and that is the problem, that I didn't think about it. That's right, I said. That is exactly the problem. I'm sorry, she said. I looked at her for a long time. A woman I have watched perform for 9 years, sitting at my kitchen table with her hands flat on the surface, not performing. I accept your apology, I said. What happens next will depend on what you do with it. She nodded. She did not ask me to define what I meant. She understood what I meant. Before she left, she asked me one thing. She asked if I would come back to Denver for Christmas. I said I would think about it. She said she understood. At the door, she paused. She turned around. She looked at the kitchen, the library doorway visible beyond it, the camellias in the garden through the window. This house, she said, it feels like you, Eleanor. Like every part of it is actually yours. It is, I said. Every part of it is. She nodded slowly. Then she left. Lily called me in November, the way she has started calling, on Saturday mornings, without her parents' prompting, just because she wants to talk. She had heard, from the general weather of her household, that things had shifted. She had not been told the specifics, and I did not tell her the specifics, because she is 10 years old and some specifics belong to adults. But she is a child who reads the room the way her grandfather read the landscape, with a natural intelligence that does not announce itself. "Grandma," she said, "are you coming for Christmas?" "I'm thinking about it," I said. "I want you to come," she said. "Not in the small room." I smiled. "What room do you think I should be in?" I asked. "The big one," she said. "The one with the fireplace." A pause. "Mom said you could have it. She said she wanted you to have it." I looked out at my garden, at the camellias. "Then I'll come," I said. Lily made the sound she makes when she is happy. Not a word, just a sound, small and whole like a note from something being played in tune. "Grandma," she said, after a moment. "Yes." I looked up what you told me. "About the river. What did you find?" "A river shapes everything around it," she said. "Even mountains. Even if it takes a really long time." A pause. "Is that what you were doing? Shaping things?" I thought about that. I said, I was more like the mountain for a long time, letting the river run where it wanted. And then I decided to be the river. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think you were always the river, Grandma. I think it just took everyone else a while to notice." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. I sat with it in the way you sit with things that a child has said that are more true than most adult observations manage to be. She is 10 years old, and she has her grandfather's eyes, and she draws horses, and she's going to be extraordinary. I went to Denver for Christmas. I slept in the room with the fireplace. My bags were carried up by Marcus, without comment, without ceremony, as if it had always been this way. As if the particular gravity of the household had simply shifted and was now organized around a different center. Serena cooked. She cooked the way I cook, not for performance, not to announce something, but with the attention of someone who has decided the meal matters. She asked me, the night before Christmas, to show her my mother's groundnut stew recipe. We stood in the kitchen together, the kitchen with the marble countertops and the wolf range, and I walked her through it the way my mother walked me through it in 1973 in a kitchen with a gas stove that listed slightly to the left. She learned it. She is not a natural cook, but she is an excellent learner when she decides something is worth learning. Marcus grilled the Christmas steaks and burned the first one slightly and swore under his breath, and then laughed when Lily pointed out that the burnt one was his because it was his fault. It was the genuine laugh, the one that is still entirely his own. We sat at dinner, and no one sat separately. Lily gave me a gift she had made herself, a drawing, done in colored pencil, of the two of us standing in front of a river. The river was very large. We were very small. The water was every shade of blue. On the back she had written, "To Grandma, who is the river. Love, Lily." I held it against my chest, the way she had held the sketchbook. Marcus watched me holding it. Something moved through his face, not guilt exactly, not regret exactly, but something related to both of them, something that might be the beginning of a different kind of man if he tends it correctly. "She's right, you know," he said quietly, while Serena was in the kitchen and Lily was showing her uncle's dog a new trick. "You were always the river. I wasn't looking." "You're looking now," I said. "I am," he said. "I'm trying to." I reached over and patted his hand. He turned it over and held mine, the way he did as a small boy when something had frightened him and he needed to know I was there. "You're a grown woman," he said. And this time, the words were entirely different. Not dismissal, not convenience. The recognition of a son who has finally understood what grown means and what it costs. "I am," I said. "I have been for quite some time. I want to tell you what I know now that I did not fully know when I was younger, when I was teaching school and raising children and watching Richard build something with the patient intelligence of a man who understood that real value takes time. I know that the women who hold things together are almost never the ones whose names are on the outside of the building. I know that patience is not weakness. It is something far more demanding than the alternative. Anyone can react. It takes a particular kind of intelligence to wait until you understand the full shape of a thing before you decide what to do with it. I know that the best inheritance you can leave a child is not money and not property and not a name on a gallery wall. It is the witness of watching someone live with integrity, watching someone know their own worth so completely that they do not require other people to confirm it. Lily is watching. I know this. She has been watching since she was old enough to notice that the world treats women who do not demand to be seen as if they have nothing to offer. She has been taking notes in that particular way children take notes, not on paper, but in the body, in the part of a person that becomes their character. I want her to know what I know, that the woman who does not shout is not the woman who has nothing to say, that the guest mugs are just mugs, that the canceled flight was, in the end, the most useful thing Marcus ever did for me, because it was the moment that moved me from deciding to acting, from the mountain to the river, from the long patience into the thing the patients have been building toward. That when someone tells you to figure out, sometimes the figuring leads somewhere they never imagined you could go. I flew home from Denver after Christmas on the 27th of December. I flew economy because I have never needed the wide seat to understand my own value. I sat by the window and watched the Rockies fall away behind us, and the plains open up below, and then the deep green of the south appearing as we descended toward Charleston. The harbor was silver in the late afternoon light. Diana had sent me a note the day before I flew home. Just one line, which is her way. Portfolio year-end review scheduled for January. A very good year, Mrs. Voss. A very good year. I looked at the harbor. I thought about Richard and the painting above the fireplace and the 40 years of light I have been walking past. I thought about Lily. I thought about what it means to be a river. I am 68 years old, and I am in excellent health, and I have things I intend to do with the years that remain. The gallery will open in the spring. Diana has identified 2 properties I want to discuss. Patricia is handling a small but meaningful gift to the school where I taught for 23 years, enough to fund 3 scholarships a year, named for my mother, for girls from families like the one I came from. My son is learning. My daughter has always known. My granddaughter is watching. The river moves. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another woman the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.